those guys, like from a standpoint of communication for people, they're also that accessible people, so they can actually come and dive into it, but they figured it out in so many different ways where it's just like, here's what we can do. So proposal details to bring back out are going to have to be necessary for that. And I think the communication of that transparency would be in that circumstance saying that I got 97% of this job and I've got 3% of this thing that is not right. So I'm gonna give you this, and then I'm gonna give allowances that are gonna attach to some of this. And here's the discovery path I have to give for that allowance.
All right, here we go, and we're back. And wow, it's been a little while. I think last year we were looking at 2025 predictions, and we'll get to that later on.
That was lovely.
But before we get into it, what is going on with that studio?
We are migrating, my friend. We are adjusting with the market right now. My goodness, what a crazy plateau we've specifically seen in the Pacific Northwest. It's been one. It's been a very, very interesting one. After 18 years in the business doing it, just to see where this is kind of just flattened out from our world. I mean, we were the office mecca from Amazon to Microsoft and all that stuff that's been going on prior to COVID, even through COVID, that type of thing. I mean, it kind of started here and it felt like it ended here too. I think the duration was just super long. And so then now everybody was into that office side. But now I think it's funny, we've just started to see in our market the residential office to residential conversion start to hit a little bit, which is even a little delayed in my mind. You know what I mean? So I mean, living through that, and then going into, we've had some pretty unique opportunities with some consultant-based work that we've kind of done for some things, but we've had to get really creative just because the market has been so flat, my friend. So,
yeah, but your first comment when you started there, I was going to say I do see a lot more plastic instead of metal in your studio, so you are keeping up with how the fenestration world is.
Yeah, that has been such a surprise to me, to tell you the truth, because for years I've been so into curtain wall and a lot of the AW aluminum windows and that direction, high performance stuff. The thermal world has been driving a lot of the decisions, I think, in the innovation sector. But it's been interesting to see how much vinyl has actually started to come out of that and be utilized, and now starting to see that like AW rated vinyl product actually hit the market, dude.
Well, I don't like to go into these with
it's fair
pre-planned topics, and I didn't want to go down that road because I do have some interesting people to touch on with that one. But because you bring that up, ironically, I maybe I wanted to trigger some responses. I commented on a vinyl oriented post yesterday, and wow, in terms of it almost felt like the left fighting the right on that topic. I know. It's very sensitive for a lot of people, and people are very defensive. And I got to be honest, I used to be a little bit of that. It's the kind of the whole camp of like the guy trying to sell domestic versus international product, and then the guy trying to sell aluminum versus vinyl, and you get better quality, but you get cheaper price point. And I am growing and evolving as a professional and understanding that there's a place for everybody and everything, so long as it meets a certain criteria and is competitive. But the sensitivity around that was wild. And for a while, I was that guy. And funny enough, now I see people who are 70 and people who are 30 that are very kind of closed-minded in their shelter and world, whether it's performance related, product related. Yes. And I'm like, oh, that was me. So I can't judge you and I can't project any opinions on you. I think it's more so like expanding, like, hey man, maybe just don't hear it from me. Try to like look around a little bit and have some conversations and see what's going on out there. And maybe you'll start to pick up on it on your own.
I know you want to be, I agree with that statement, because I actually kind of went through a very similar side of it. Like, as the market adjusted away from a lot of those engineered aluminum curtain wall systems that we were really doing with some maybe ribbon window punched opening slab bypass things that were going, like some of those deals, the cost implications is basically just kind of driven it towards where these products have now been discovered. I entered that place to like, oh, you want to go to vinyl? I guess the job's not really the direction it's supposed to go. Like, you know what I mean? It was like, and I had to get into that place of like finding out like what was actually happening within the performance level of, and the innovation level of what was happening with vinyl. Cause Adrian, I'll be the first to admit, like I had it bad. And the reason why I say that is because I I remember I even had it from like, oh, if it's not AW rated, it's CW rated window. I thought that was like, you know what I mean? Like I was like, like I had it like in that world where you know what I mean? So to go from that place to now we're looking at projects that actually do have AW rated vinyl stuff that are actually 15 PSF performance levels, operables, and I say operables in the traditional way of thinking about it in aluminum of like anything project out for casement awning and something like that. Like, oh, like these are large operables, 4 foot by 4 foot wide, 9 foot tall operables. You know what I mean? Like yes,
But
bro. Yeah.
really,
Like
because
awnings. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, ask a silly question. If you're a hard-hatted, aluminum guy, if a
Sure.
CW rated aluminum product is on par with or better than an AW rated UPVC product, because when you said that, I'm like, wait, that's still me because I still downsell a CW rated product.
Sure. Yeah. That's why I'm saying like that's what the conversion for me. It was just like, wait a minute, and then to really dive into it. I mean, now that the in-swing products are there from a property line standpoint, you know what I mean? Like those things are actually available in there. Yeah, you're getting bulkier things that are happening from a sightline standpoint because you do have to have more material that's associated to it. But when you get into that level of like design, now all of a sudden, like I'm even bumping into the path of like looking into UPVC product that now is like, okay, does it have a comp channel of some sort to kind of compensate for building movement? Like we're having conversations that never I thought would happen in a vinyl world ever. You know what I mean? It was just like, oh, nail fin, stick it in a punched opening type of a deal, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I really didn't want to touch this topic on this
fine.
podcast, but it's so
you
interesting.
Did it. You said a lot more plastic.
So many questions. Damn it. So what I see them do is I think the product is good. The product can work in certain configurations and certain sizes.
Yes. There's limitations.
It's interesting throwing in some aluminum accessories, components to be able to give some shape and dimensionality and, installation accessories. But I've been I do constantly think about like all these, European systems, and everybody looks at these, advanced thermal break technologies and being able to do huge spans and still meet passive house level criteria. And, they have this notion of like, maybe not today, but in 4 or 5 years, whatever, it'll be so code driven that the U values will, or sorry, the either cost premium or supply chain complexity will sort of sell it. It'll have to be sold regardless just to meet the criteria. But the question becomes, at that point, are the fiberglass and UPVC suppliers so advanced relative to where they are now that you're just that pie of wood, steel, aluminum, vinyl, fiberglass is going to really start evening out across the board in the commercial sector?
Yeah, I've seen it from a couple of angles too. Like I got the SSG curtain wall, that Cadillac, basically looking at improving that from a thermal perspective with high performance glass to triple glaze to VIG, that direction. Like I saw that projection going, but the race that's come up from the other side from a UPVC product, fiberglass product, is caught up significantly. From a capacity standpoint for sizes, where now we're starting to see in the AW window world, a lot of thermal break technology starting to improve, where it's starting to now sandwich where like you're starting to see window thermal break technology from the aluminum side come into where now it's aligning with vinyl performances. So I see this kind of like that race of like, okay, but it's all now we're looking in this flat market, Adrian, and now we're cost driven, right? We're very, very cost driven in our thought processes. And so I don't know, I'm starting to see that type of innovation kind of go through it. And I think that it's all because of the weak link of what aluminum did thermally. I think within the world that we're starting to see that's coming in from European systems, and deep European systems, not just something that you would typically say like, oh, it's just from Western Europe, right? Like we're talking from like Eastern Europe area direction of like stuff that's coming out of the Middle East. Like there's some technologies there that actually have been proven for a while that are coming this direction, which is it's very, very new from a domestic standpoint to kind of coming into, because I don't think we've seen that domestically happen, but I'm starting to see this domestic thing start to catch up for sure.
I've been talking to more and more just people who obviously after this transition, who are understanding what they're bringing into the market, what they're doing. And this guy's trying a new Italian beautiful window with this sexy hardware. And this guy's trying this metal panel fabricator out of Turkey that, can do these colors that no one else can achieve. And it's It's fun talking to you because I think we see things similarly and have somewhat of a similar background, but we're as far as it gets across the span of the country.
We
Yet,
are.
there's similar requirements,
Yeah.
but I think kind of industry wide and even like palette wide across the facade spectrum, whether you're like metal panel glass, unitized sunshades, whatever. Do you sort of Where do you see this going in terms of like, especially since you're constantly assessing companies and vendors and
Correct.
suppliers?
Yeah.
I haven't been around, I'm in this industry over a decade now, so I have some experience, but not enough to say I've seen this for decades and these companies come in and out and in and out. But like these companies have hit their stride, have a wave, and it's like, holy crap, how did they get so
Yeah.
much market share? And
Yes.
then you always have to ask yourself, how sustainable is this? But when these companies grow and get so big and it's like they have their special offering, I don't want to name a specific company, but I met with the
I
owner
get
of a
you.
glazing contractor recently, and he goes, I remember when I met those guys 8 or 10 years ago when they were first getting into the commercial market, and every single morning the owner would walk the floor, walk the line, greet the guys, make sure everything was going perfectly. And of course, they start getting more market share. They start expanding. They start saying, maybe we should get into, let's try some vinyl or let's
Mm-hmm.
try some residential grade stuff. All of a sudden, you remove yourself from that core competency. You get distracted and you get shiny object syndrome and you're constantly pivoting. And all of a sudden, maybe you lose sight of what that original offering was.
Well,
And
it's you probably I don't know. I look at it differently now versus where I did then because I see that I think that there's a lot of that stuff that is so market driven from what actually is happening, as we saw office be such a carrier of what was happening in the commercial space to now we're looking at these mixed use buildings. The we're spread out as far as the footprint. It's not so urban focused anymore. So now you're looking into wider markets. You're looking into deeper territories that you've now traveled to as a glazing subcontractor. And now your market doesn't necessarily become within a 40 to 60 mile radius of where you are. Now you're looking into different states or adjacent states that you were there to. And I'm talking from the West Coast perspective, right? So that like obviously centralized out of Seattle, like driving 5 hours to Spokane is and then and cross compare that against what you're going to be doing, in New York, driving 5 hours, you're nowhere near where you're at. So if there's, I see that where we're looking at is an interesting fact because you're going back to those core competencies of that business and you're going, now the market is driving me wider, but it's also now introducing this newer technology that actually has to come into the market because of code progression. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I look at that side of the business from a contractor standpoint is truly managing the contracts, but being 100% the specialty inside of that specification space. And I've seen the specifications and the design criteria start to change significantly because of and what I believe. And I don't know. This is market side, but also this is basically just from like the International Energy Code. Like you're looking at the energy code progression, and it's been interesting because you'll get into some areas where like, oh, we traditionally use vinyl. Like, oh, we were already meeting that progression. We were already meeting that. Oh, that vinyl is getting better. Oh, we're just okay. We'll buy that better. We'll buy that direction. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think it's evening out some of that stuff because I'll get into those other peripheral markets of like central Washington or eastern Idaho, that type of area, and they've been using a lot of that lesser grade CW vinyl UBVC product, but now the the codes are more and they're required, and then all of a sudden now it's like, oh, we'll just they've upgraded this model for that structural upgrade. You know what I mean? So and now all of a sudden these people that were hardcore aluminum guys are having to switch to some of that stuff, of having to switch to that train of thought. So it's yeah, I look at it as a really big industry switch as far as mentality is concerned. I don't. That's what I've been through in the past, probably last 2.5, 3 years.
in this current market dynamic, who do you
Yes.
think has it worse, manufacturers or glazing contractors? And manufacturers being product constrained, while glazing contractors might be, region constrained.
Their challenges are migrating into more specialty products, so they're having to become more focused in a wider term. So they're not necessarily these are our 4 to 6 to 10 vendors that we worked with. You know what I mean? Traditionally, now they're looking into not only that core, but then they're saying they're being challenged by the general contractor core to actually bring in other things. So if it's more specialty side of stuff, if it's a ballistic side that they have to kind of bring in, or if it's a vinyl side, like that type of a deal, those are things that they really haven't played with from a core standpoint. So that's going to be very tough from a administration standpoint, and also purchasing and those things. So that's tough. But then you look at manufacturer side domestically. This actually goes back to some of the stuff that we were talking about on the predictions, to tell you the truth, because I saw that there was the new product development that was within a core competency of a manufacturer had to do with maybe the commodity product that they were dealing with, aluminum or wood, or vinyl, like those commodity products, right? So you could see those manufacturers kind of sit inside of that aluminum manufacturer, a vinyl manufacturer. Now that's starting to bleed, right? Now that's starting to come into that world. So either that aluminum is going to get better from a thermal perspective, and I don't know, aluminum's not necessarily getting cheaper by any means, but you know what I mean? It's that type of pressure. And I, in my mind, if there has not been new product development as a core competency of a manufacturer in the last 5 to 7 years, I think there is a chasm they're going to have to cross in order to get there, or there's going to have to be very interesting mergers and acquisitions ahead of us in order to make work. And I think that brings a different place. So that me thinking out loud about it now, I think there's pressure on the glazing subcontractor side of things as far as to spread that with with what you believe your core competency was. But now you're looking into bringing, from a manufacturing standpoint, like, oh, we have to open up the aperture a little bit more as far as what fenestration actually means for us. You know what I mean? As a manufacturer.
Few comments. So I spoke to the company called Class A Union Glazing Contractor recently, and I said, "How come you're not asking me for a vinyl price?" And he goes, because he gets asked that from his GCs and owners, and he goes, if we want to go down that road and go down to a race to the bottom, they're not going to buy a 50-cent window and spend $100 on labor. They're just going to go to cheaper labor. So if you want to tout yourself as a premium or higher end glazer, it's tough because you are looked to or asked to provide equal to or equivalent to basis of design specification and design documents, but you constantly have to be scouring for a more competitive supply chain. And it gets to the point where you might have your basis of design, but how do you find a supplier that's more cost competitive? And what does that mean? I spoke to an architect this morning, and she goes, yeah, we want a cheaper product, but we don't want to compromise on, our performance criteria, our design. Fair, because I think people associate cheaper as lesser than, or I must be compromising in some area.
Right.
And when you do enough homework, domestic suppliers, overseas suppliers, you can get good quality products for cheaper, whether that means they have a more vertically integrated supply chain, cheaper labor. Depends how they want their margin structure, how efficient they are. But there's a lot of pillars when it comes to that. There's lead time, so how quick can you be? There's price.
That's correct.
There's design, whatever product you're offering. And then there's differentiation, whether it's a relationship, customer service, that's kind of the X factor where I think you could separate yourself. But there's not really, let's call it in the basic window sector, there's not really any suppliers that can do something, that no one else can touch. I think there was one day where,
I would agree with that.
At a certain point where there was a certain specialty manufacturer of names I won't name, but who touted we can do sizes and hardware and performance criteria that nobody can achieve. And I think, the more other people catch up, you got to be constantly asking yourself, like, okay, now what's our value proposition and how are we going to separate ourselves? I was always kind of envious of these glazing contractors having the flexibility to, let's go find someone else. It's a balance because you have to have your core vendors and strong relationships with them. But I think you're right. The core focus for manufacturers is where's this market heading and how do we need to pivot or evolve from a product development standpoint. And then glazing contractors, it's almost like there needs to be an R&D team in the manufacturing side. How is our product evolving? There needs to be an R&D team on the glazing contractor side. How is our vendor supply chain evolving? Right?
So it makes me think about a couple things. So you bring up the point of the initial first comment was like, okay, if we want to do a race to the bottom, you made that, right? And I think that is a traditional thought based upon a perception that is, in my mind, now a very old school way of thinking. And I say old school, but it might just be 5 years old school. Adrian. Like I'm not trying to kind of put this into like this 20-year, thing. Like there's been, you know what I mean? And so and then the other thought of that is you're saying R&D inside of a glazing subcontractor world, like, at least in the West Coast area, there's been a lot of machinery and a lot of investment that subcontractors have made to automate facilities that they have, and they've become these mini manufacturers for aluminum products specifically based upon machinery technology that's advanced in a simple format. So bringing it out from a storefront standpoint or a curtain wall standpoint, a lot of that prep and fabrication is now being done locally, like at these glazing subcontractors. So now they have this manufacturing component attached to it, and so that has been the growth from a new product development standpoint, where all of a sudden they're getting into it and they're looking into it. And I've talked to a lot of these kind of engineering directors or engineering managers. Now they're not necessarily project managers; they're really just kind of engineering managers for the glazing subcontractor firm that basically take the job and they'll load it within the shop and they go through all the fabrication details. And they're becoming very smart about stuff. But now it's now they've got these businesses built where it's like, here's my core competency of aluminum. Like, this is what I have to do. Like, now they're dealing with like, oh, wait a minute, this, brand X is not necessarily advanced from a thermal standpoint to get me to what I need to do. Okay, I'm using that not necessarily 80% of the time. I'm using it now down to like a 60% time. And now I'm looking at these other 40% areas of the project or the contract as I've got to bring in this other thing. So now we've got this competing thing internally inside of the glazing subcontractor world where they're going, how agile am I to basically bring in these other high performing products, be it UPVC or fiberglass or something like that, which are traditionally going to be pre-glazed of some sort. When in reality, they would like to actually do that within their shop. So now it's like this, it's a little bit of a mixed bag between it. I do think that there needs to be a lot of new product development coordination and innovation that now needs to come from the glazing subcontractor back to those aluminum manufacturers to really challenge them into a place where, because you walk into a lot of those aluminum manufacturers and there hasn't been a total big push for new product development from a advanced standpoint, from a thermal standpoint specifically. There's key pockets in the market that have, but they're not necessarily associated to those traditional maybe big 3 or big 5 that you're looking at.
If you're a manufacturer and your goal is mass production, you don't want to be a specialty $15 million guy. You're trying to go 80 million, 80, 120, 150, 200 nationwide manufacturer that can supply material anywhere. And you're thinking about ease of integration into the design process. So how can an architect go on our website and pull from our CAD library, pull details, pull specs, pull test reports? Basically, how do we eliminate that archaic, I got to talk to the sales guy and he didn't answer, and then we need an answer now, and then blah, blah, blah. So they're able to plug and play. So remove that friction. Now you could be inputted into design documents or construction documents, rather. You have some old school guys. There's two notions. A, I don't want to share our secret sauce, which I think you'll never get rid of.
Yeah.
B, you might not see that as much. There's still a lot of that.
That's funny. Go ahead. Go ahead. I want to have you finish your thought.
I recently I've heard people say, well, if we share too much and then they use the wrong accessory with the wrong window frame, all of a sudden their design documents might be incorrect and not constructible or not installable. And then people are going to be pricing the wrong thing. What really is the answer to gaining more market share as a manufacturer? Spec-driven project buyouts might be really market specific or like clientele specific, depending on what product category or project category it fits within. But I don't know. With the remote nature, with like all these people saying, you know what, I'm done with lunch and learns, I don't want to do this anymore. Where do you see that evolving in terms of, because let's be honest, no glazing contractor wants to go through a substitution request if they don't have to. So path of least resistance is going to bid basis of design or what's listed in the specs, but that's not always realistic.
No, it's not. The path that I see, and just to reiterate your questions, is just the path that I see the design support kind of going to from a traditional architect path. Is that kind of the direction? And then what is the glazing subcontractor now challenged with to now kind of support that?
Yes. Yeah. You're pretty good at distilling my rants into
no.
level
That's why. Look,
questions.
hey, look.
No, it's good. Great. No, you're right. You're right. I go on a tangent, but you're good. So yes, I like those
okay.
two.
So from the architect standpoint, above, I want to say, from the architect standpoint, they're in an increasingly tighter timelines to produce deliverables than I think we've seen in a long time. I've seen it's not your traditional design bid build path, and there's been so much of that design assist, design build, integrated project delivery that has kind of infiltrated that. So I think there's enormous pressure from a response time standpoint that the architects are under. And I think that's just because of technology that you can go and really at your fingertips, sitting there watching the Mariners game. I got to think about this. You know what I mean? I'm going to go on my phone. I'm going to do this. You know what I mean? Like, and they'll they'll find a seed, something that is just like immediate, right? To kind of get that thing. But it doesn't necessarily flush out exactly what needs to happen. It's more of just something that, I'll look at that, or type of a deal. But the response time, for some reason, is this quick hit for them that they have to have, because I also think that they're underneath enormous amount of pressure from a deliverable standpoint. That when those deliverables get done, they have to be pretty intelligent to make work, because they're going to be the communicate documents downstream from a contract standpoint. And then to answer kind of from the glazing subcontractor side, how is the glazing subcontractor preparing themselves to support that process from a response time standpoint, and also from a technical capability standpoint, to make sure that works? Because the downstream is, you still have the same people involved, architect, consultant, owner's direction, and also the general contractor and their team into their glazing subcontractor. So you still have that same party that's involved, but everybody is lockstep into that place. I think it's a newer challenge for a glazing subcontractor traditionally, if they have not been involved in design assist work, if they have not been involved in design build, if they have not traditionally been, or maybe they had one project manager kind of be that guy for them. Like, that capability is starting to expand into an expectation, because response time is needed for those deliverables to be done. And glazing subcontractors not only have to say, like, hey, here's my solution for this really crazy cool balance door with this amazing finish, but also here's how it integrates into the overall entrance and structure. Here's how it anchors. When in reality, maybe that balance door was done 12 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, they don't know that. That's an extended product, but they think that architect team and the contractor team, the owner's team, think it's just as an easy answer as like 2x4.5 storefront center set. They think that is that easy. That's a perception that comes. So there's an increasing amount of knowledge that the glazing subcontractor has to have at that base to pivot and to basically support those deliverables, because I don't think we're getting more time on a job in the design standpoint now. I think we're getting less time on the job in the design standpoint.
This is another one of these exercises where I need to remove myself from what I've experienced, because that might be a 5% of the market. And I don't want to be I'm trying to come up with the right word for it, whether it's sheltered or in a bubble. Like, there's so many people that live in that, either in a market or a product. Like, this is how things go. And,
correct.
I started my career on the unitized perma enclosed jobs, where just everything was scrutinized. 2 years of a design process, full-fleshed PMU, VMU, factory quality control visits, full-blown quality control testing, commissioning in the field, down to, now let's look at cheaper alternates, overseas products. Now let's go really down the rung of a lot of these housing projects that I see going in that are getting window replacement, that are essentially getting a like-for-like aluminum window, a 3.25-inch 4-inch bridge double hung, going in a new 3.25-inch aluminum double 4-inch bridge double hung. The only thing that's getting changed out is now you get a new Cardinal IG with 270. Really, like, you're going through all that effort just for that. Yeah. Basically, you're replacing the glass in essence. So, and on a job like that, I don't even know if they're doing a thermal analysis. I don't even know if they're checking deflection of the glass or doing like a full shop drawing set. So I don't know. It's this question of like what you're describing in this integrated project delivery design assist world. Glazing contractors have to have resources in order to execute that.
That's my point.
Yes. How much hand-holding do you want to do? Do you give them a $50,000 design assist budget? Do you give them anything? Do you just want to get in the door? And then now they need to work with their manufacturer, but their manufacturer is not getting paid. So they're going to be limited in terms of how much info they can get from them. So do you see the industry going in a direction where, I spoke to a guy right now who's in development of it, trying to build out a software, call it, that basically will allow for you to unitize, panelize your facade and have all your inputs, outputs that allow you to understand all factors and implications associated with changes. You change this, there's this change to the structure. You change this, there's this change to the lead time or the supply chain or the cost. And so the more automated we are on that front, I guess the less friction between the design team and the construction team, and sort of maybe you create a landscape where everybody's on a little bit more of the same page and you could focus on more critical items. Because I think this method of designers designing in a vacuum, waiting for GCs to get pricing, GCs waiting for their subs to get pricing, going through the process. So it's super, super archaic. I mean, it's not sustainable. I think the industry is evolving to know this doesn't work with a fully fledged domestic labor force where you have a huge engineering team, estimating team. It just doesn't work to compete against your competition, either domestically or overseas. So either we're going to have to lean out, we're going to have to become more automated because everybody's looking to offset or push down that liability. And so the leaner the glazers and manufacturers have to become, ultimately, is it just going to become a race to who's the next guy that's willing to take on that challenge?
That is a very interesting question. I think it has to do with how willing you are to be that resource, first off. And now at the level of how fast information flows and how much access we have to information that's basically kind of just creating this transparency, you have to be willing to have to be that, to go into that and find those domino paths and to know those things. But you also have to be transparent in like what would be considered probably a secret sauce, right? And I think that's what you have to kind of, I don't know, there's personality traits that there's things that like, oh, we're never gonna, that secret sauce I can't really kind of expose that because that's not what we've done forever, right? So that's I think the challenge that actually is coming. But in my mind, like you have to be willing to have that transparency, because at the end of the day, that owners, our client, all of our client, the owners, the real estate development side that does it, they've had so much stonewalling the past where it's just like, that is what it is. It's going to be what it's going to be. That's what it is. And I don't think that that's now there anymore. I think it's a place of like, okay, let me share that with you. The reason why this finish doesn't work with this finish is because of this technology. And you have to explain that. You have to be that type of a thing. The reason why this 42-foot opening that you've got designed with a 5.5-inch deep frame has to be loaded with molten steel to me, or whatever it may, like, you have to explain that from a structural standpoint. You have to become that transparency for it. And I think that there's been, it was just like, oh, just let me take care of it. I'll do it. You know what I mean? And I think that's where we're seeing a little bit of that switch where like you have to become transparent and you have to become willing to actually talk about those technical aspects that drive those decisions, because they're always going to be, those things are there, but they're not going to be as accessible from a place of like manufacturer has to be implemented, but they're not getting paid. Some of those things those are kind of the areas you have to understand how that's going to go, and you have to lead that down that path. And I think that there's that's why I think that technical resource and that new product development side combination between glazing subcontractor to manufacturer has to be a little bit tighter. I think those relationships have to be a little bit more than what they traditionally were, of like different parties go to this different party and this different party. I think they have to become way more integrated into that path. And I think that's a new territory. That's kind of a new frontier from that side of things as far as that communication path, because information's just flat now. There's not necessarily a hierarchical place that happens.
Do you want to avoid talking specific suppliers? Maybe it would be better just to talk, because you've seen it on the inside, on the outside, just general perspective on it. What maybe you decide if you want to mention or not based on the question. But let's say you are a supplier that's not exactly productized.
Say again, not exactly
productized. So an aluminum fenestration, you're not just saying, here's our detail, take it or leave it. You're expected to do, on this bid, we need this custom fit profile or extrusion around the window perimeter. We need a different means of attachment or whatever it is. So just a new die or something atypical on the project. The question of, can these suppliers and manufacturers be nimble enough to respond to stuff like that on a consistent basis? I'll ask, oh, is this guy nimble? Can he get out a quick concept detail or proposal detail? And I think when they're small, they're going to say, yeah, of course, that's how they operate. The question is, can these companies, and there's one in particular who you used to work with a long time ago.
Yep.
I don't need to guess who it is. Can you do that at scale is the question.
I don't know. That's and I want to say, because it was always the traditional path is like, oh, let me go ask, and I'll mention his name, is let me go ask Fronic. Let me go ask my internal guy. You know what I mean? Let me go ask the dude. Like, he's that type of a thing. And I think that's still inside of the manufacturer's world, where it's like, I have to go through applications and engineering through it. Well, I'll mention manufacturer we work a lot with is Quaker, and they've become, like, as an example, they have a very accessible path to people. And I think what has been an interesting path to understand with them versus where I've been in the past is it's not been anything where, I think what they've tried to do is just basically kind of give a process to it, give an access point, and then you go answer your question, has been the past side of it. So you look at it and go, oh, that's been we'll give you an engineering library and you can kind of figure it out. You know what I mean? Type of a deal. And and that engineering library is basically become archaic because of the attachment methods of certain things, right? And so the people aspect has to be stronger. That technical resource of actually scaling that into that customer, rather than having that one place or that one thing because the evolving nature of those things. I mean, I just yesterday was looking at a detail of an integrated curtain wall detail at a lobby that had to basically go from level 1 to level 2 because there was great amenity space, but on top of level 1 there was the balcony thing where now all of a sudden the stick curtain wall had to act like a balcony railing in the same plane as the adjacent level 1, right? And I don't want to call it ignorance, but it was more of just saying that, hey, here's what we want. It doesn't work in the design that we have, but this is what we have to have priced.
But
so now
come on, Brad, you work with the Habers, figure it out.
Right, exactly. No, that is a very true statement, and I will lean on them all day long. You know what I mean? Like, no, but it is like, that's actually a really good resource example. Like, I would say that those guys, like from a standpoint of communication for people, they're also that accessible people, so they can actually come and dive into it, but they figured it out in so many different ways where it's just like, here's what we can do. So proposal details to bring back out are going to have to be necessary for that. And I think the communication of that transparency would be in that circumstance saying that I got 97% of this job and I've got 3% of this thing that is not right. So I'm going to give you this, and then I'm going to give allowances that are going to attach to some of this. And here's the discovery path I have to give for that allowance. I think if that communication can happen, which Habers do extremely well in that world, it's a place where they can actually, they bring that transparency to it so that they know that contract tree and that design tree understands where some of those liabilities could lie. So they can get this other part that's a really, really solid. And and that is that sacred cow, so to speak. That is that place of just like, they understand how to implement those types of communications. I think deploying and scaling that technical resource, but also the communication resource of that is a big deal, because I don't know, traditionally you bring it down the path of like bringing it into manufacturer, bringing it into a certain area, and the entire fenestration scope is stopped because 3% of it can't be figured out.
Well, yes, and interesting because that's who they want to be, and that's how they tout themselves. So they need the infrastructure behind them to be set up to service opportunities like that. And when 8 or 9 out of your 10 opportunities look like something custom, something highly engineered, you have to have the beef behind it and probably the price point behind it to follow. But one more question for you. What you just said there about, we got to go to Fronic. I'm sure for years, did he ever think to himself, and I don't want to speak for him or I don't know him personally, but like, this can no longer go on. I need to have this Fronic effect spread out between 4 people.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew Steve Fronic for a long time, and before prior to his retirement, and a very good friend, incredible resource. There was a lot of different people that actually he trained into that place, and they've spread out across industry, and they're inside, I think, in a pretty cool format as far as where they've been. But I don't know if it was actually at that time in a demand where he maybe had 4 or 5 different guys that could actually do a lot of that stuff, then they would have to come back and check. You're going to have to make sure that is scaled. You're going to have to make sure that is employed across the industry. But I think it has to do more with communication of the sort of saying that here's this area that I'm giving this allowance for with these type of reasoning. I know that there's a yellow, this is kind of a caution area. And I think it has to do more with that transparency of communication now to go back to those resources to allow that time for. Because I think if you stop the entire train in order to get like 2 or 3 seats filled, you know what I mean, is going to be, I just think there's too much pressure from a real estate development and what we have to do in the market in order to get this to place. So I think there's a deployment of just making sure that you actually have transparency and communication adjacent to that. And then salt and just seasoning with that stuff as it comes back within. And I think that creates the advocacy, that creates the technical resource that you can become. And also then it invites you to, as in your profession and in this place, to learn, to grow more, being like, okay, I'm going to put that in my quiver for next time.
Very well said. Give us a little Edify Studio shill and where you might be and where you can find you guys.
So Edify Studios is www.edify-studios.com. Heavy into, that's the website for us. Activated, really active on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to kind of chat and to hit us up about certain things. But we would love to obviously continue the conversation with however that needs to on your project.
Thanks, Brad. A lot of fun.
Thanks, Adrian. Appreciate the time, man.
Talk soon.